thanks so much, Noah. Can everyone hear at the back? Can you hear Brett? Yeah. So yeah, it's a great turnout here. Thanks so much for everyone for being here. So many friends in the audience. It's quite amazing. Really excited for the conversation with Shlomo. Close friend, colleague, and former boss. Shlomo hired me to Checkpoint Software in 1996.
I hired you at the second attempt.
A second attempt. There's a story. Exactly. Yeah, Shlomo pursued me for a while, and I was hard to get. And one night he took me to dinner in Palo Alto and said, "This is it. I've been chasing you for a few months now. You got 24 hours." So I had a sleepless night, and I signed the next morning. Yeah, exactly. If you hadn't done that, maybe things would have been. Former boss, colleague, friend. We worked together across multiple companies: Checkpoint Software, Imperva, Sumo Logic, Palo Alto Networks, Cato, where my partner Jerry's on the board. It's really a privilege. I think we have about an hour, so what we're going to do is we have a bunch of questions for about 40 minutes or so, at which point we'll turn it over to everybody here. So hope you have some great questions for Shlomo. Going to talk a little bit about the journeys Shlomo's been through, and then just kind of from there, talk a little about entrepreneurship, investing, the Israeli ecosystem, the state of cyber, and just keep it pretty free flowing.
And what is Elon Musk doing in the Oval Office?
Exactly. Yeah. We can start there if you want. So maybe just to start things off. So Shlomo, what got you interested in entrepreneurship? It looks like we should take these mics.
I don't know if that's.
Try that.
So everybody, I don't know if everybody can hear me.
Maybe take it.
Okay, take this one. Everybody's talking about the Israeli ecosystem coming out, startup ecosystem coming out of the army, and basically Zionism being a big startup. Actually, for me, entrepreneurship is more of a Jewish thing than an Israeli thing. And there was, in my family, there was a heritage of entrepreneurship. And my grandfather it's a long story. Should I tell a long story or should I kill them after? Anyway, his name was Shlomo, like me. He lived in eastern Poland. He was, he had a power station and some industrial complex. And he was the richest Jew around, until Stalin came and deported him and his family to Siberia, put him in a gulag, where he should have died, like a decent Jew. But instead, he took over the machruka business in the gulag, which is basically the newspaper rolled cigarettes, and became the king of machruka, and survived 5 years in the gulag, and then found his family in Siberia, took them to Salzburg. I don't know if anyone saw The Third Man in Salzburg. All sorts of things happened there. We don't talk about it. But after a few years, he was well-to-do again, and then he decided that Israel is going to be a real thing. So he moved to Israel and started Kitan and a bunch of flour mills and stuff like that. And that's the story that I was brought on. And that's a story of an individual that lives in an environment that doesn't let him be part of the establishment. So they need to create their own establishment, their own startup, their own path to success or survival. And what's interesting is that my first startup, Checkpoint, my first commercial startup, Checkpoint, was actually the first offices was his apartment, his last apartment, because it was vacant. So for me, it was closing a circle. So it's a little bit of a Jewish family story of immigration. And I know that immigration is something we share.
Right, exactly, yeah. So that's a great, maybe lead in into Checkpoint Software. So you started Checkpoint in 1993. Company went public, I think, sometime in 1996.
Right.
Network World and many others, have called you the father of the firewall. What made, sorry?
Makes me Gil the mother?
There you go.
I'm not sure about the...
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So tell us about Checkpoint. In that era, many companies started in the firewall business. There were a few others that went public.
Yeah.
That first era of companies, they're all gone.
Yeah.
There's really only one standing today. So, but what made Checkpoint?
What made Checkpoint successful, I'll start with the bottom line and then extend, is the fact that it provides that operational efficiency. So the competing technology was proxies, and we came with stateful inspection that was, single floppy disk. If you all remember what it is, you install it, 5 minutes, it was up and running. It has a nice graphical UI, which was amazing at the time, PC-like, and it provided for protection to any application, even applications that were not yet available. You could define those applications. So it provided for operational efficiency. What was once a few weeks of a professional services project that delivers 2 or 3 applications became a 5-minute implementation that was easy to use afterwards. You don't need any expertise. And it provides its business agility, because if the business wanted a new application, you can provide that new application securely. And really that, if you look at the 3 generations of network security, the software, the appliance, and SASE, that was the driver to each one of them. And when the steam went out of that form factor, the next one arrived. And the reason that the stateful inspection was built that way is that it was built for something completely different. It was built back in the IDF to protect 2 internal networks. And that was a use case that really required that flexibility and support for multiple applications, et cetera, to say that sometimes you have to be also very lucky.
I think sometimes people say, like, you can be lucky once, maybe twice, but when you have so much success multiple times, it's more than luck. So this, so you were at Checkpoint. Checkpoint started in 93. You founded it, went public in 96. You left in 99? 90?
Yeah,
99, okay. Left in 99. I remember in that era, of the stock market, I remember the market cap at one point hitting 27 billion. So you could have gone to the beach, right? So tell us, why Imperva, and then just about the Imperva story. And also just also tell us there. Similarly, there were multiple people that tried tried that market in that market timing, and there was only one company that again went, made it and went public.
Yeah.
The others all were, we don't even remember the names anymore. Yeah.
So when I was done with Checkpoint, Israel was pretty young environment of startups, and the concept of a serial entrepreneur was unknown. So you did a startup. Why would you do it again? You already did a startup. So what's the point? So I took some time. I invested a little bit. I met my wife, had fun, but got bored. And tell you quite frankly, I can't stay on the beach. I don't like the sand. And I like to build things. And that's my passion. That's what I did even as a PC kid, before the army and during the army. And I guess it's not work, it's just passion. So I looked at the industry and found that this was a recession, but there was one area that continued to grow significantly, and that was what was called application servers, meaning kind of the web fabric that overlaid the network was growing. And the idea was to build something that provide protection to that, both to the application and eventually to the data behind the application. That was completely new. There were no data security companies, and for a good reason. There was no regulation, there was no PCI, there were no disclosure laws. So we started, and we came out with a great product, and there were crickets. So, you know, nobody knew what we were talking about, and that was a completely different challenge than Checkpoint. That was a challenge, and later we'll talk about what the entrepreneur needs. That was a challenge of keeping your vision and believing in it and instilling it to the employee for a period of time until PCI came in 1 quarter. There was a market, and we were successful because we were strong enough to wait, and because we were flexible enough to make changes. Because when the cloud came, we said, okay, appliances are great, but we need to take this to the cloud. And we started in Capsula. That was an early competitor to Fastly and Cloudflare.
Capsula started before Cloudflare, yeah, just on that
right
concept.
Together, yeah. And was head-to-head competitor at the time. And I think resiliency and flexibility were the 2 reasons we survived.
So, and what year did Imperva start? Was that 2000?
2003.
2003. And so the company went public
2011.
2011. You know, then was a public company for a while, then got bought by private equity.
Right.
And then got bought by another company,
Thales.
right, by Thales out of France.
Yeah.
So post Imperva, I think you were very early in seeing kind of, you know, the move to cloud. And I think, I remember talking to Shlomo, you know, right in that time period, and I think he had tremendous foresight to see that, you know, there was going to be a need for networking and security both to be redefined.
Right.
And that's kind of the start of the Cato story.
Right.
So maybe you just talk through that story for a moment, and then, you know, where we are today and where we're headed on that. And then after that, we'll go to some more general topics. Yeah.
How many moments do I have to talk about Cato? So actually, there were two elements. One was specific to network security, and the fact that the appliance overstayed its welcome. There was a Palo Alto network appliance, had a great network security stack, but it was not in the line of sight of what became more and more important. The salesperson on the road accessing Salesforce, so you need a cloud proxy called CASB. Home user using published application, you need ZTNA. Branch users wanting to go directly to the internet, not to the data center, you need secure web gateway, and so on and so forth. So basically, there was an increasing stack of solutions that the CISO had to deal with for network security, and a new form factor was needed to recreate the perimeter in the cloud, and that was the key idea behind Cato. I would say as a final sentence on that is that this, what we identify, is actually part of a bigger movement that covers all areas of IT security, both the endpoint with Cloudflare, the cloud with Wiz, and is replacing an industry that innovated only through startups and created huge amounts of point solution the CISO had to integrate and create a solution with a much more limited number of platforms that address the same challenge. So we identified that on network security, and we're early to be part of a much larger movement that Gartner 4 years later called SASE, and the future of network security.
And do you want to comment on just where Cato is today and just looking forward, and then, yeah.
Yeah, so Cato is 1,300 employees. Last year, we announced $200 million ARR. Since then, we've grown substantially. I think we'll update the numbers soon. We are the fastest growing company in the SASE market. And still, we are the only company that have built a SASE platform from the ground up. And platforms are very different than portfolio. Portfolio you can buy, platform you have to build. But once you build them, you've built a train that moves at a much higher speed than a portfolio company and creates a much better contract with the end user that gets on that train and enjoy this level of innovation.
Great, thanks. Okay, so now let's move on to some other topics. And many of us know Shlomo for the companies he's done, but he's also a very, very active angel investor. In fact, like I've thought over the years, I wish I'd just written a blank check into every company you had introduced me to at the start. Yeah, so it's just amazing. I think you've been at the start of so many other companies, and you've helped so many other founders on their journeys. So maybe a question would be like, what do you look for when when founders approach you, and how do you decide who to fund?
So the question is, what do you need in order to be? It's not everything, but what kind of jumps when you look at and actually afterwards I would like to ask you the same question. It's actually a set of contradictions, right? Because in order to be an entrepreneur, it's extremely difficult. Don't try it at home. Or do it on your own risk. It's extremely difficult. So you have to have extreme vision and a conviction in what you do. And on the other hand, you have to have intellectual honesty. And you have to look reality in the eye and change course as needed. So that's one contradiction you need to find at an entrepreneur. It's really important to learn a lot, right? You need to listen to everyone. Entrepreneur not always knows. It's a long way. It's very different stages, very different skill sets at each stage. So you need to listen and learn from everybody. But at the end, you also have to make your own decision by yourself and not be influenced by authority or any type of external influence like that. And third, I'm looking for the rebels, for the entrepreneurs that won't listen to me, right? In a sense, right? I want to invest in people that object to my existence there. And you need to think differently, and you need to, otherwise, but at the same, you need to take that energy and tunnel it to be able to build a system that is scalable and works. So you need to balance also these two characteristics. If you take all these three contradictions and balance them, you'll find a great entrepreneur.
Thanks. So actually, maybe I'll just share a quick anecdote on the rebel point you brought up, and then maybe I'll just add some thoughts on founder things. So many of us in the room here know who Nir Zook is. Nir was a very early employee at Check Point Software, was one of the key engineers there, and he's the founder of Palo Alto Networks. He left Check Point, what's the right way to explain it? Like angry at the company.
Unceremoniously.
Okay, exactly. and these are all the polite versions, right? So after he left, right when he was starting Palo Alto, he changed his license plate. And the Check Point ticker is CHKP. So for many years, he had his license plate read CHKP space KLR, right? And this is just when the company was started, and he was driving around this car with that thing. One day the car was parked outside the Ritz-Carlton, and there was one of these public stock kind of events going on, and all these fund managers were taking photographs of the car. Hold the stock, who's this person? Anyway, like years later, At one point, Palo Alto surpassed Check Point in revenue size. So Neil very quickly went out and got another license plate and changed the plate. And the new plate said CHKP space KLD. So like that's he had a chip on his shoulder. He had many things motivating him, but he had a chip on his shoulder, right? So I think on the founder question, I'd start by saying it's very hard, right? I mean, I've been in venture now over 2 decades, and if you ask me, like, what business are you in? Yeah, we're in the markets business, we're in the technology business, but we're fundamentally or primarily in the people business. And I think it's much easier to assess markets and technologies, and which are hard by themselves, but assessing people is just a very, very hard thing to do, right? So with that said, I would say, and we make a lot of mistakes every year at Greylock. I've personally made a lot of mistakes around this. But so with all of that said, I would say probably say 3 things, right? The first one is you're looking for people that are high intellect and people that are, are learners, right? So people, we use the concept of learning machine, or people that can get better quickly. So that's kind of the first piece, intellect and the ability to learn and, outlearn others, right? The second one I would say is just mission orientation. And, and then what comes with that is perseverance, grit, ability not to kind of, somebody was talking this morning and was asking me the question about like, hey, why did SpaceX succeed versus Blue Origin, right? 2 amazing people, and then he was telling me the story, replaying the story of SpaceX, the first few launches all blew up. A lot of people would have just given up then, right? But they kept going, right? So the second piece I would say is mission orientation. And then the third piece is, I'd say, the ability to work with others, or self-awareness, and knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then the ability to kind of build teams and create a culture where people want to come and work there. So it's something like that, but it's really complicated and hard. Like, yeah. So maybe let's go to entrepreneurship next. And as a repeat entrepreneur, what are some of the challenges, and also what are just some key learnings that might be interesting, for folks here?
So I guess, what, I'll give one challenge in each one of the companies that I was operationally involved with. So at Check Point, the challenge was, it sounds easy and stupid, but we were 3 people in an office. That was the second office, not my grandfather's apartment anymore. And then Sun Microsystem, the CIO came to Israel, loved somehow we got a meeting, loved the product, signed a contract with us. And if you remember, Sun was the biggest IP network in the world, a global reach, huge distribution range, and right in at the perfect moment when the X Mosaic came, the first browser. So immediately there was enormous pressure to deliver to this beast, and we are 3 people. So, building an organization fast, I don't know, there's a name for it, I think.
Blitzscaling.
Blitzscaling.
Yeah.
That was blitzscaling at challenge, and we learned a lot from that. We made a lot of mistakes there. I talked about the challenge at Imperva, which was kind of the challenge of grit and being able to wait. And the challenge at Cato, I would say at the early days, and this is the reason Cato is still the only company that really embedded network security in the network. And while there's a graveyard of companies from Juniper with Juno OS, buying NetScreen to ACE, a project of Cisco, to many, many different startups that simply failed doing that. And there's a good reason that they failed, because network needs absolute stability, 5 nines, being up all the time. And security is extremely dynamic. It requires thousands of updates every year. So the first few years at Cato, only version 3 works, and if it's an Excel spreadsheet, that's fine, you reboot and it works. If it's the corporate network, you get a phone call at 3 a.m. in the morning from the CIO that you are stupid enough to give your mobile phone to, and shouting at you, the network is down. So that was a period where many people thought it can't be done. And we were able to get to the point of doing that through major innovation. And again, when you look at the competitors, the appliance companies, nobody's even attempting to do that. So I would say that these years were particularly challenging in, again, it's all belief that you can do it and reach that point.
And how about just any additional lessons, or what else would you say? Or any advice for entrepreneurs in the room? Yeah.
Pick the right idea, because it's going to be 10 years, and if you believe strongly for 10 years, hopefully something is going to come out of it. So we need generals with luck, I think Napoleon said.
Okay, so let's go to recruiting. In all of these journeys, I mean, you could almost argue, once you know what you're working on, there's nothing more important than recruiting.
Right.
So, any lessons or advice?
That's a question for you, Asheem, because you are.
Well, maybe you can start, and then I'll add, or here.
Yeah, you can start.
Okay. So, what would I say on recruiting? Look, I'd again say it's really hard. And actually, maybe I'll just start with the. Actually, recruit. I have my own kind of filters for people, and if you have 45 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes, how do you try to figure somebody out? Sometimes it's on the bookends, it's very easy. In the once you move away from either bookend, it gets a little harder, especially in the upper bookend. Like people in a particular zone. So actually, I'll just start off by sharing one maybe a trick or tip that actually Shlomo gave me many years ago, and you may or may not remember this, but. And I've actually, continued to use that tip, which is, if you have like 60 minutes with somebody, right, try to find some area which you believe they should know something about, and that you know enough to go back and forth with them on, and try to do that for about 10 minutes. And most people would, should enjoy talking about something they know about. And I think if you're able to go back and forth, for about 10 minutes, you're either going to gain respect for that person, like, hey, this person is well-grounded, or you're going to think the person's a flake, right? Like, and they don't. So, just in a repertoire of things, that's one,
Right.
maybe
And I agree, this is a very hard decision.
Yeah.
And in general, I believe that a hard decision is a lot about collecting the data.
Yeah.
And talking with and having all sorts of tricks like that to collecting the data. And then, at the end, making a decision based on gut feeling. And I don't mean that as a spiritual thing or something. I mean that I think that the mind has much more processing capabilities than where the flashlight of awareness.
Yeah.
And you have a gut feeling about that, you should trust it, because it's a very viable mechanism.
No, that makes sense. Actually, I'll add one more. I caught up this morning with somebody who's a quadruplet, like one of 4 kids, all born together, and all 4 kids went to MIT. Okay, quite amazing, right? And this guy's in the startup ecosystem, and so just catching up with a bunch of topics. And we actually talked about this topic just on early stage, and how does he choose who to invest in? And so what he shared with me is the following, and it's actually very simple, maybe as I say it, but like. He said everybody looks at past performance, so you should look at past performance if you're evaluating a candidate, but he said you should pay even more attention to current performance. It's just a slight tweak, but I thought there's a nuance there that's actually quite important.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe it's a good place to open it up to the audience. Actually, let me ask Shlomo one more question, then I'll open it up, which is, what's your view on the Israeli startup ecosystem today, and any thoughts about the future?
So I think it's never been in a better place. That's we've been through a year and a half that was difficult. The industry showed a lot of resiliency. I think there were companies that bought. There was one company that bought a couple of companies at $1 billion in the middle of the entire war. Valuations for cyber in Israel are at the same level as the Valley. I think that the entrepreneurs are much more experienced. The ecosystem is supportive. So I think this is going to be a good next decade for the Israeli cyber.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's. So maybe on that note, like we'll open it up. Yeah, question.
What's the next shiny object in cybersecurity?
So cybersecurity has been like should I?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe just repeat the question, Shlomo.
What's the next shiny object?
In cyber, yeah.
In cyber, for the next. Cybersecurity has been like a pharmaceutical company that focuses for 30 years on developing a molecule and forgetting the delivery mechanism, right? That's not good. I think that the next 10 years needs to pay much more attention to innovative delivery mechanisms, which is the way that every CISO can consume this increasingly complex security solution and deliver it to the organization that is becoming increasingly agile and fast-moving. So I think the how is going to be the shiny object in the next few years.
Maybe I'll add to that, and I feel like we haven't talked about AI yet, so it's a good place.
AI, right.
got to interject some AI, but I'll just maybe just talk thematically at a high level and say, like, I feel like we're entering the era of good AI versus bad AI, right? So what's been going on today is, if you look at the past or where we've been or where we are maybe right now, right? It's really humans in a battle against humans using software, right? And it's an asymmetric battle, right? Because if I'm protecting an organization and, someone else is a bad guy, they just need to find one hole and they're in, right? And so that's almost like, it's a very difficult thing to kind of fight. And I think what lies ahead of here is, and there's a huge shortage of humans that can do this protection. There's numbers out there, like there's 3 million open jobs in cyber or something like that, right? So I think where we're headed next is basically, everything you're seeing with agentic frameworks and just things that are moving very, very fast in AI, this is, of course, the bad guys are also implementing this, right? And the toolkits that hackers use and nation states use, of course, they're going to use these technologies too, right? So I think you're going to see the volume and the sophistication and the speed of these attacks go to a whole next level, right? And so then, there's no way humans could fight the humans. Humans are not going to fight AI. And so it's really going to be AI against AI, just conceptually. And I think that's kind of where we're, headed next. And it's going to be fascinating to see where this all goes. And, some people I talk to say that they're very pessimistic in the short to midterm, and they think that things are actually going to get much worse. But people say, like, if you take a much longer term view, there's reasons to be optimistic. But yeah.
Can I say something about AI?
Yeah.
Nobody asked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it's really important. I think this is perhaps one of the most important subjects in society today. And it starts from the AI's ability to blur truth from false. Now, I believe that human beings don't need truth or false. What they need is to survive, and what they need in order to survive is consistency, is to understand that they are in a world that is consistent and they'll survive the next phase of it. It used to be a religion, faith. Nobody asked whether it's true or false. People believed. And then science came and consistency became around true or false. And that brought liberalism and democracy and difference of opinion and negotiation and all the good things we know from the last few hundred years. What happened in the last couple of decades with the internet and social is that science is turning against itself, like a snake eating its tail, and killing that truth and force, and driving people back into a faith existence, into a bunch of churches. And that by itself, there's a church of Fox News, and there's a church of MSNBC, and there's a church of your clique in Twitter and whatever. And nobody wants to know what's true. You know, even if these platforms are going to say it's not true, nobody is interested. And the worst thing about it is that First Amendment societies are extremely vulnerable to this process against societies that are totalitarian and has a single church. There is identity between the church and the state. They are going to collapse. And we are going to an era where the state and the church are going to be one and the same, unless we do something about it. And that something is not popular. That something is going against the First Amendment and limiting it by making the platform vendors responsible for their content, and by a number of other measures. And we have to do it quickly. Otherwise, very bad things are going to happen.
So you're saying free speech is out and monitoring
It needs to be limited to some extent.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be gone completely.
And you think platforms need to take responsibility for their content?
As you know, that's a major first step.
Yeah, and in the recent weeks, things have gone in the opposite direction, right? Or are going in the opposite?
Yeah. Right now we are,
Yeah.
and I wonder why, whether they are going on themselves or there are some forces from the outside that are driving it.
Question, you're good.
Back to the recruiting people part. Is there like a platitude or piece of advice that you hear that you think is incorrect or not nuanced enough?
So
On recruiting, is there a piece of advice that you think is incorrect? Yeah, like is there a common view on recruiting that's actually incorrect? Yeah.
yeah, the thing that usually I'm resistant to are people that come from, that has success with companies with brand name. I like people that come from non-brand name and are successful there, because they had to grind in order to get that success. They could not use the brand in order to drive their... so kind of these resumes with great brands are not necessarily, you know, promise a good success.
Other questions? Back there, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, more of a statement than a question. To state the obvious, to say that the success of Checkpoint wasn't just the success of Checkpoint, but it helped grow a whole industry in Israel. And perhaps one of the reasons cyber is a pet industry today in Israel is primarily to start with the Checkpoint success. I'm stating the obvious because I'd like to testify that this was true for the company that I was working for. Shlomo, we know each other from the Ross building. You were working with the enemy on your master's degree. I was on the other side of the building. You went to work for Checkpoint. I went to work for a small company called Algorithmic Research. We did encryption products, signature products, and so on. And we didn't succeed as much as Checkpoint did, but the reputation of Checkpoint helped us enormously. The success rubbed on us in our ability to say that, you know, we're neighbors of Checkpoint. You know, maybe you should talk to us because maybe, you know, something interesting to tell you. The ability to open doors and the ability to trust the products that we produced. To a certain level, it came from the success. of checkpoints of those things. So thank you for that.
Other questions back there? Yeah.
Question. Thank you both for being up there. With the nation-state actors and geopolitics that's going on in Israel, U.S., obviously China, the biggest opportunities in cyber AI technology space is all with nation-states now acting like competitive companies.
Yeah, so maybe just to restate the question, just with the geopolitics and what's going on between countries and U.S. and Israel as well, what are some of the biggest opportunities in cyber? Or just, or is that, or yeah? Or,
Yeah.
go ahead. Let's see. You know, there's, I mean, the first thought that comes in my mind is offensive security, right? And there's a number of companies out there. Some of us know the names of these companies. NSO Group may be the most, you know, infamous of those names, but there are several newer companies that are up and running. And, you know, I don't know, maybe there's more opportunity for some of that. That's, you know, one thought that comes to mind. But yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a very complex. There's a lot of. It's very complex because China had its own dynamic versus the U.S., right? And they're very, very well staffed, from what I know, right? And the U.S. may consider them like either the primary or a primary, one of a couple of primary threats. Russia has its own dynamics. Israel's an ally of the U.S., a close ally. But yet, I think if you talk to people in the U.S. Government or agencies, I think they might say that their view is Israel actually spies on them more than the others, right? And so, I don't know, like, yeah.
Yeah. I agree. The only thing I have to add here is that on the defensive side, which is what I've been doing for the last 30 years, cyber is a very different, very strange animal in the relationship between citizen and country. Because if you got attacked by some kinetical way, the state is going to protect you, right? And if you are, I don't know, a hospital in Alabama that got attacked by a cyber attack, hey, you're on your own. You need to perhaps report to the FBI. I don't know how it works, but perhaps they'll pay attention after the fact and whatnot. I think that needs to change, actually. And to some extent, the state needs to be more involved in the protection of both individuals and businesses. Either through education, through auditing, through budget support, or the combination of all these.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great point. And also, like in that particular case, you know, my best understanding is the U.S. government does not want you to pay the ransom, right? And they really, you know, get angry at you if you do. And so, you know, if any of us in the room is the CEO of a company and your company is hit by ransomware, right? It's a real dilemma on what to do. Now, I also feel I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, like, we're involved with a company called Rubrik, and some of us may know that company. So there are new technologies that have been built, you know, around data protection, where basically, you know, if ransomware hits and you use the right products today, right, those products will restore for you. And, you know, that's led to a boom. You know, those products have become much more important now. And also those products are now being bought by the CISO, not just by infrastructure IT. Other questions?
I have actually two different questions. One, Shlomo, for you mainly is, if you were to go back and give advice to yourself, apart from don't do it, what would be the advice you would give yourself to start a company, or what's the most important thing? And then a question to both of you, what's the best piece of advice or the best thing that an investor has done for you? And what's the best thing you've done for a company that you feel?
What advice would I give? That's a very good question. I'm not sure.
I'll call you later.
Knowing how hard it, yeah, would you do it again?
No, I would advise myself to enjoy it more. Let's say it like that. Yeah.
Not easy.
And the second question was, what's the best?
Either help or advice that an investor ever gave you.
Help or advice that the investor ever gave me.
That's a hard one. Yeah. And you know, it's hard to answer the other one too, right? Because I think end of the day, right, like look, the reality is the entrepreneur makes it happen. Management teams, you know, and companies make it happen. You know, boards and investors play varying roles, you know, can be helpful on, you know, a variety of topics, right? All the way from strategy to recruiting to, you know, just a set of things, right? So, but it's really, you know, it's really the companies that make it happen, right? So, yeah.
So I now remember, I once had a dinner at Erwin Federman's house from USVP with my to-be wife. And then we walked to the door, and then he leaned and said, "Don't fuck it up." Now, every time that I have an argument with her, I remember Erwin Federman.
That's a good one. And Steve, how old is Erwin now?
He told me the same thing, by the way.
How old is Erwin? Yeah. Yeah, how old is Erwin now?
He was going to celebrate his 90th birthday. Unfortunately, with Dick Kramlich and the mayor of San Francisco, Jordan, but Dick just passed away.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Other questions? I don't know. Okay, yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.